Welcome to the Actionable ESG Talk series brought to you by AKFI, the Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry consortium committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation, and of course, AI. Actionable ESG Talks series bring together great minds to discuss the current state and the future state of ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. And I'm really delighted today to be here with our guest, John Friedman. John, I have a long biography, but first thing I'll start that he's an international career with an international career spanning three decades. He's an award-winning communications and ESG sustainability leader who has helped global companies integrate their operational, financial, and cultural initiatives into sustainable and responsible business practices. We have about 50 minutes today, 55 minutes today, so we'll not do justice to his biography, and definitely would like to have John back to continue his stories from the global sustainability. Thank you, John, for joining us today.
My pleasure. We'll see what we can cover in 55 minutes, and I'm happy to chat with you again. If anyone watching this wants to reach out through LinkedIn, it's the best way to reach me.
Thank you, and send, or I should have the LinkedIn, and we'll add it to the profile. We usually start with a broad question about the current status of sustainability, the current trends, ESG, and digital transformation. And how are they converging? How do you see them doing? There is a lot of change since we talked last, it's probably 2 years ago.
It's been about 2 years, and yes, a lot has changed, but a lot has stayed the same. So I think the first thing that it's important to let people know is that the rumors of the demise of sustainability and ESG are greatly exaggerated. In fact, what we do see is two opposing trends that are converging right now. One is this politically based opposition to ESG and sustainability, but at the same time, the rest of the world and several of the states are moving forward with the standardization of reporting and even regulations regarding what companies are being asked or required to disclose in this area. And at the same time, we're seeing investors want it. The data clearly shows that customers want it, employees want it. So this is not going anywhere. And that's, I think, an important thing for people to realize right now, because especially in the era where there is a lot of talk about it and a lot of questioning about it, the answer is this is a socio-economic trend that has been going on for at least 70 years, and it's not stopping. It may get slowed down and it may get diverted, but at the end, this is still moving forward. And the digital transformation is part of that. Companies are caught right now between should they invest in preparing to meet those reporting requirements or take advantage of the reprieve and hold back and save some money. They do know that the reprieve is temporary. They do know that if they want to do business around the world, they're going to have to do it. And so a lot of companies are moving forward. And the interesting thing is that's where the digital advances are coming in. Companies are looking for computer-based solutions rather than staffing up, and they're looking to collect the data, not just environmental data, but other ESG related data, but particularly the greenhouse gas emissions data, which is interesting. I want people to know that that is going to be required in the European Union, as well as in California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, and Colorado. That's a third of our nation's gross domestic product. So any businesses that want to do business in those jurisdictions are going to have to ramp up. And so data collection and aggregation and calculation and reporting has typically taken companies months because it's done on an annual cycle. And that's the part that companies are looking to streamline and reduce both the time and the cost.
Oh, that's excellent. And actually, you're absolutely right. I notice in my activities that people are actually getting more focused on sustainability. The measurement part, as much as we know, It's actually focused on greenhouse gases, carbon footprint, primarily inputs in general, water, electricity. You're absolutely right. Sustainability is here to stay. And judging by the students I see, there are actually more and more students that are taking undergrad and grad courses on not certificates, but diplomas in sustainability. So the young generation, it's coming up, John. So we will have new forces soon to support sustainability in companies. So absolutely right. And it's very interesting what you said also about greenhouse gases or carbon footprint, because this is the first thing to be reported on. You're absolutely right about the states being about a third of them being already with sustainability requirements in the books, in the laws. And just to mention, California is the fourth largest economy if you care to do business there or not, right? But without sustainability, you can't.
And
So
I'm glad to have you reinforce that because one thing I often say, and I want to anyone who's watching this, if I say something and I you can't find a confirmation or a reference that I'm referring to, um, then challenge me on it, and I'll provide the links to Manuel, but I'm happy to discuss it with anyone and show it to anyone because one of the big hallmarks of this is the need for more transparency by companies. And that includes the sustainability profession in being transparent about what we're saying. We've got to go beyond well, it feels right and demonstrate the business case. And I guess we'll talk about that in a bit.
absolutely, we actually broke down the list in ESG, sustainability and AI, and sustainability AI, and we're building up to our link between sustainability AI and supply chain. So we we have a long, but careful what you wish, because once we put your email address and your LinkedIn profile on, in the public domain, we'll hear back from you and say take it out.
I've been public with this work for 25 of my 3 decades of career. For 25 years, I've been out there on LinkedIn. I've had my email out there. I have absolutely no problem talking about this, defending this, and explaining this to anyone. Now, with time zone differences, I will say I might not get back to you immediately, but I will get back to anyone who asks anything.
And really, message to our everybody that watches, uh, take up John to his office, because he really has the hands-on experience, and there is nothing better than just learning from people that have the expertise and the scars of the fights, if I may say. So we are going to talk about ESG in particular, and as you said, ESG seems to go through fads in sense of being merged with sustainability. It hides under sustainability names, but it's here to stay. And one thing which you already mentioned, there is an external pressure on companies, and there is an internal pressure. And companies respond to internal pressure, strategic objectives, with tactics, with processes, and so on. How do they balance between the external pressure and internal pressure? What's your experience? What did you observe?
Well, based on my experience, and this is also the model that I've been implementing with companies going back to January 2000, there's 5 keys that companies have to keep in mind. And this will all come together. And I call them keys because they're not in order. You have to do all 5 things and do them well in order to maximize the value of company has a growth strategy, a sales strategy, a financial strategy, operational strategy, cultural strategy that they are trying to achieve. Alignment with that is critical. You have to demonstrate and build a program that supports the business in what the business has set out for the business to achieve. That's number one. Number two, you've got to be compatible with the day-to-day realities that people in the business face. They have to be able to do it. It can't be, oh, this flies in the face of what we're trying to do, so we have to do it as an exception. It has to fit in with the daily operations. The third one is you have to empower and engage employees at all levels in the company. Classic example of this is safety. You can't just have a safety team that is solely responsible for safety. Safety requires everyone to be vigilant, to look out if they see something that doesn't look right or they see something dangerous, and to look out for the person standing next to them in the theory that that person will be looking out for them.
Absolutely.
Fourth one is consistent, comparable, and decision useful data and information. Because if you have decision useful data, you can actually help inform the business. And if you're measuring the things that the company has in its strategy and you show that you are helping to improve the things that the business has set out strategically to improve, then you can justify the program itself because it's paying for itself. It's a help. You have to be able to quantify your results. You can't just say it feels good. And the last one is where we get to the other pressures, stakeholder engagement, active stakeholder engagement. That doesn't just mean storytelling. You have to listen to what those external pressures are asking you to do. What are the pressures? What do your customers want? What do your employees want? They're not external, but they're a key stakeholder. What do your investors want? And you have to have a dialogue with them to explain to them and help them understand what is feasible and what is feasible on what time frame. You can't upend something. If you're trying to evolve towards something, you have to continue to provide products and services along the way. You can't just turn everything off and start up again. And there are things that take a time to unwind existing contracts and put in new parameters on the contracts when we talk about supply chain. You can't just say, if you don't meet this standard, you're out. You've got to continue to have things brought into your company so that you can use them to produce your products or make your services. And so you need to have that conversation and help manage that expectation. Those are the 5 keys that I've developed over the last 25 years with some refinement, but those basically are the same keys I've had all along. They're actually the first chapter in a book that I wrote. I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to sell books. I'm not here to do that. It's called Managing Sustainability, First Steps to First Class. And this is the first step.
Excellent. And no, and thank you for sharing. And again, I don't know if your book is still in print. How old is
Oh,
it?
yes. It
Okay.
was published
Well,
in 2020, right before COVID. It's available on Amazon and Business Expert Press, who's the publisher that asked me to write it.
oh, excellent. So definitely, if you want to find out more about the 5 keys and how to open the safe, but the image you gave me is you have 5 keys and 5 different stakeholders with the keys, some internal, some externals. And if they don't work in concert, if they don't synchronize, the safe will stay closed. Or
And,
you
and
know,
that's why they're keys. They're not steps. You shouldn't do them in order. You have to do this all. You have to build it in to your approach.
yeah, exactly. And on the supply chain, we discussed, John, AKFI, it's looking at creating a standard actually for supply chain that will probably line up with your supply chain key. And again, coordination, sharing, it's an important part. And what sustainability has done, if you look for instance, in the reporting part, what sustainability has done, it's actually created a completely different set of requirements. Let's start with double materiality, which is an important requirement for the CFOs, for the chief financial officers and their organization to report on sustainability impact. It created requirements, as you mentioned very well, for data transfer, in particular in carbon footprint inputs, but also softer data like social and governance, and definitely through the finance lens again, profitability of these sustainability efforts. So they all come back into this key model, and thank you for sharing it. And that leads to how do you do it ethically? Because one of the biggest challenge, I just finished a meeting with an expert in the supply chain of hyperscalers. And uh, I'm not saying the data is intentionally not produced ethically, but there is a lot of room to improve. So what's the role of ethics in the keys?
Well, that's interesting because we can get into a whole separate conversation about ethics and legal ethics and cultural ethics and situational ethics. And the fact of the matter is, transparency is what you need to aim for so that you are not being disingenuous with what you are saying and what you are doing.
Totally.
But the ethical construct of what is right and wrong often comes from our cultural backgrounds, our legal backgrounds. This is why when you're working internally, we always work with the legal team. Yes, we work with the CFO, but work with the risk management team, work with the lawyers, work with the human resources department, work with the procurement and the people looking at supply chain, work with operations. You can't sit in a silo. And this is partly from my background in communications. You have to see the big picture. And when you talk about data, that's why it used to be, I had a different phrase for it, tangible local data, but I really picked up the phrase from my time working for Grant Thornton, one of the nation's world's largest advisory and audit firms, is that idea of consistent, comparable, and decision useful data. Because people can measure things different ways and it becomes impossible to compare it. Yeah. And how can you know if you are doing what you set out to do? Obviously, in finance, it's easy because those things have been established and well established for many years. And earnings before interest, depreciation, and taxes, quarterly returns, and so forth. That's why this movement in sustainability to align around universal standards is so essential because otherwise you could say, well, we're the top in, let's say, human rights in our supply chain according to this metric and this parameter and this group. But another company can say, well, wait, we're number one because we went with this scale. And if we don't start to bring these things together, it's not comparable or decision useful. Not comparable for the businesses and for people making decisions and investors, but it's not decision useful for anyone either.
Absolutely, and you provided a very strong argument that you start with ethics, and I would say, and you didn't say it, but I would infer that if you don't have good quality, accurate, aligned data using same metrics, if you want, uh, forget about using AI because AI
Jump to
AI
AI.
doesn't work. Yeah, it's junk, garbage in, garbage out. If you're not careful with your data, AI is not going to save the day.
Well, and getting into AI and data, there's a fantastic study out. It's called The Illusion of Thinking. I encourage everyone to look for it. But what it really basically points out is the difference between the various artificial intelligence models, the large language models, the reasoning models, and what it comes down with determination is that if it's a simple problem, and the data is provided in a completely consistent way so that the AI knows exactly where to get the data, grab the right number from the spreadsheet. If it's a spreadsheet of three numbers, it's easier than if it's a spreadsheet of 3,000 numbers. And then you have to make sure that the units are consistent, metric versus imperial. But we use some of the same terms like tons. So it has, there's going to have to be a human oversight on it. But what happens with AI is it's very fast, up to 3 to 5 times faster, but it doesn't guarantee accuracy. Data can be corrupted, data can be incomplete, data can be misconstrued. And if you don't have human eyes on it and you tell it the parameters are, it's looking for, the number of kilowatts that you purchased in electricity, in order to get the greenhouse gas emissions, you need to know where that electricity was generated to know which emissions factor to use if it's hydro versus if it was coal at the two extremes or two of the extremes. And so AI is not at a state now where complexity works. And that's the thing companies are doing. They're looking for it to solve the complexity problem of having to ferret this data out that's often in different places across an organization. You know, your fleet has your fuel use, your operations have your electricity use, and so forth. And greenhouse gas emissions come from all other kinds of parts of the organization as well. That's just two examples. But
Well,
if you have 12 months worth of data and you have five operations, that's 60 data points you have to make sure are getting mapped correctly, aggregated correctly, and calculated correctly. When it gets to that level of complexity, the AI just simply isn't there yet. It is getting there and they're working at it, but it's not there yet. And I've worked on it with a company. We tried to do it and it couldn't get some of the data because it couldn't access some of the places where that data was stored. And even doing it within an organization becomes very it's touchy for people, and your risk people are going to be all over this because they're going to be, as much as they're afraid of your data analysts looking at the data and what you might find out. And I've experienced this in my career. They're going to be even more afraid of a machine going in and doing it. And I'll just give one example. I was looking for data on wages and trying to see if the company, how it correlated across a number of dimensions, including gender, but longevity, job role, job responsibility, performance evaluation, and the levels I had to go through the company to get approval for me, an employee, a trusted employee, to have access to the data that other departments had, but were nervous about what I might do with it if I shared it. Imagine the nervousness if you put it into an artificial intelligence system. What are the parameters on that AI to make sure that that isn't part of its body of knowledge that it takes outside your company?
you're bringing back memories of a really tragic story of the UK postal service, where data was an error in programming, and people ended up in jail and ended up with their career destroyed and so on. And eventually the government has to step in, and now they owe a lot of money back in compensation to these people. And this is before we use AI on a large scale, or even I can even say it was AI, the culprit. On the other hand, we have a saying in AKFI, and we're saying data was made by humans for humans. And you brought a very good example. It's like if I receive data from US and it says we measure 5, I know it's in inches or meter. It's not in meters, and I need to convert. It's 5 inches. It's not 5 centimeters. And there are errors like that, fairly common actually. So data was made by humans for humans interpretation, and until recently we never thought of data even being cleaned up for AI, as you
Well,
as you very well indicated.
but what AI has the advantage on is in some content aggregation, getting away from that data, spreadsheets for a moment, understanding words and multimedia and content and video. And AI's tools can go beyond data scraping and start to understand relationships between data points. And it helps in some of the analysis. And I was just recently talking to someone who is using this for their supply chain, which I know is
Hmm.
something that's near and dear to your heart, because AI can actually serve as an early warning system for some of the issues in supply chain that allow you to find things like natural language processing can start to look for patterns in worker grievances. Hotline
Hmm.
transcripts, if it's allowed access to those, a lot of them they're kept proprietary, but social media posts, because those are public. And the AI can find a recurring theme, let's say unsafe working conditions, um, or people don't think they're being paid or compensated fairly, or even if they're aware of some things on the environmental side that they think their company is doing wrong. AI can find that. Imagine trying to find all the things that people put on TikTok and Instagram and so forth. AI can go through that. And then the company can look back at that and say, wait a minute, we're seeing a pattern in this geography or in this kind of supplier or in this company, individual company, and can flag things like high risk regions, sectors, or suppliers well in advance of the annual audit that a lot of companies do with their suppliers. And it's only, in that case, it's only a subset of their suppliers and they're checking and they're looking for specific things. AI can also help alert things. But again, I caution the human eye is critical because it can be wrong. AI does what they call hallucinate. It does make connections between things that are not necessarily supposed to be or should be or validly connected. So that's one place where the AI is actually really showing some tremendous promise.
There is a medical term even I've seen attached sometimes. It confabulates. It makes up stuff.
And yeah, I think we run
That's a
into a
diagnostic.
problem with too much of using the human terms, right? Because
Yes.
it is not rationalizing. It is simply pattern recognition and it is putting it together and giving it to you. It is not evaluating. It doesn't know the difference. And this is why sometimes you see cases where it references studies that didn't happen or in legal briefs, legal cases that didn't happen. Well, it's not making that up. AI can't be creative. It can only be the aggregation of the information put into it. But it can't sometimes tell the difference between, let's say, a legal case that was filed in this local jurisdiction and a legal case that was referenced in a novel by an author that used it to justify something. I don't know any great examples, but it can't tell the difference between truth and fiction. Heck, humans are having a hard time. And with some of this digital manipulation we're seeing and some of these deep fakes, it's going to get harder and harder for people, but it's going to get harder and harder for AI.
Will be fun for another time we meet to see how it reacts to Conan Doyle, right? To the novels.
Well, perfect example, right? It has Arthur Conan Doyle's famous detective, Sherlock Holmes, is a
Yep.
detective. It also has actual detectives as detective, and it may not be able to discern the difference.
A detective, it's a detective, it's a detective, you're saying.
I'm saying that you
With the
have to
way AI
check
sees this,
the way
AI
AI
sees
sees it.
yeah,
Yes,
of course. No, that's and we started already to talk about the link between AI and sustainability, but let's focus a little bit more about that. We talked about the limitations in creativity, contextual understanding, and really how AI, you see AI being used in this very complex environment where data is not there together, you need access and so on. It's not clean, right? It has biases and human biases and fake news and fake data. How do you see it being used, if it is used already in sustainability and decision making? I think you already mentioned that in one case you trying to do it and sort of the experiment showed that things didn't quite work out, if I understood you correctly.
that was really more looking at data collection and aggregation. We were trying to reproduce what a human being was able to do. The AI was faster, but it couldn't get as comprehensive a view. But in terms of decision making, I'm just going to point out that even self-driving cars have accidents. There was a famous movie in the 80s called War Games where they turned over the nuclear weapons of the United States to a computer that could make decisions in real time. And of course, it misconstrues something and that becomes the whole unwinding of the story. And I won't spoil the movie, but it raises a real point about the need for human review, human gatekeepers, and fact checking and independent assurance, if you will, on top of any data that ESG is AI is collecting and aggregating and generating. And I've also seen it used to write reports where it takes the reports that a company has done, the annual report and the financial filings, and pulls those numbers automatically into, let's say, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index or the Global Reporting Index or CDP, and helps streamline some of that reporting. But I've not seen a case where people are handing over the autopilot, if you will, and letting it fly the plane. And I'd
No,
be very cautious about doing that.
and based on the current state, definitely will be highly risk action. And we know, for instance, you brought the examples of lawyers who brought cases to the court just to find out that the judge knew a little bit more than the lawyer and said, no, this is not it was in my court, but this is not a real case, right? This is not what exactly happened. And AI, of course,
or it hallucinated completely cases and put in citations that didn't exist.